Hello, everyone. Rabbi Zaboulani here, learning Rabbenu Avraham ben Harambam on the Parasha Toledot with Parasha Study Plus. Today's topic will be, was Yitzhak Avinu wealthy or was he poor? We'll see a mahloket on the issue, and we'll get to eventually Rabbenu Avraham ben Harambam's opinion on this and why it's so significant in understanding the story of Yitzhak along with Esav and Yaakov's conflict. So the Parasha starts off discussing the sale of the Bechorah. Yaakov gives over to Esav this lentil soup. And he eats and he drinks. Esav sold his Bechor right to Yaakov. And essentially the question that Ibn Ezra, which we're going to be analyzing right now in the meantime, is why on earth would Esav forego his Bechor right, which is supposed to include the inheritance of his father Yitzhak? Why would he give that up for lentil soup? That doesn't really make much sense. Why would anyone do such a thing? So the Ibn Ezra develops an entire theory with many proofs, which we're going to see, and that is that Yitzhak Avinu and the family at the time was quite poor, in fact. And the reason why Esav would have rejected, forgone, not cared about Vayivez, the Bechor right, is because it was worthless practically. They didn't have any money. There was barely any inheritance to really care about, and thus he disgraced it in his eyes. It says that Ibn Ezra, his father had no money. So what good was him this Bechor right? It continues, many people will ask on this, what are you talking about? Avraham Avinu was very wealthy, and certainly he left over an inheritance for Yitzhak. And he says, what? Have you never seen? What, have you never seen a wealthy person that eventually in his older age got poor? So that's what happened. The family of Avraham, Yitzhak, was wealthy at one point, and they lost their wealth. And at the times of Yitzhak and the time of the story that happened, they had lost their wealth, and Yitzhak was not wealthy at all, according to the Ibn Ezra. And he brings 6 different proofs for his theory. And he says, number one, first of all, look at how much Yitzhak loved Esav. How do you explain such a thing? It must be that because Esav would provide for the family, he would go out and hunt and bring home food, while Yaakov did not do that. Yitzhak loved Esav. If Yitzhak was wealthy, then what would he need Esav to bring home and provide? It's because they were poor that was a very valuable thing that Esav provided to the family, and one of the reasons why Yitzhak loved Esav. Number 2, he says, look at how little food there was. If there was a lot of food, right, he wouldn't have sold his Bechor right for Nezid Adashim. What is this Nezid Adashim? What is lentil soup? He's selling his Bechor right for it. Go into the cupboard and get some real food. Nezid Adashim? Yeah, says Ibn Ezra, they didn't have any food. That's what they were eating. This very low class, not satiating food, Nezid Adashim, a lentil soup. And when Yitzhak eventually wants to give the blessing over, why does he need to command Esav to go forth and bring food? Don't they have food in the home? Why does he need to go out and get the food? Seemingly, says the Ibn Ezra, they didn't have food in the home and they needed to provide. He needed to go out and provide that. And number 4, why didn't Yaakov have these begadim in the first place? When he's going to pretend to be Esav, Rivka has to make special new clothing for Yaakov. What do you mean? You don't have clothing lying around the household? You don't have something that he could put on in order to dress up or as order to be like Esav? They didn't have clothing, says Ibn Ezra. And number 5, when Yaakov eventually runs away, he's running away with nothing. He arrives at the home of Lavan with nothing. How do you explain such a thing? If you're going to send your child off to a faraway, distant land, aren't you going to give him something? Money, jewels, wealth, something in order to be able to make sure that he's taken care of. But Yaakov leaves with absolutely nothing. And if you want to tell me in number 6 that, he wasn't able to bring because it was he wasn't able to carry, it was so quickly, then eventually wouldn't Rivka, who loved him so much, eventually send him something with some of their servants? But no, Yaakov gets nothing when he goes away, according to Ibn Ezra, because they as a family have nothing. And this is the explanation of the Ibn Ezra. Rabbenu Avraham ben Harambam, whose Perush we have been studying for several weeks now, highly disagrees. And he says, Rabbi Avraham ibn Ezra, it's so exciting to see how the Rabbeinu Avraham read, appreciated, very much respected the Ibn Ezra, but respectfully here disagrees with his perush. This claim that he lost all of his money, he went into bankruptcy, right? He had no money. Hu perush chaser ta'am. It's a explanation that has no taste or really no proper meaning. If you read the rest of the story, it makes no sense. It has no value, this interpretation, and we're not going to systematically break down the Ibn Ezra's perush and bring proofs against it. The Ramban Nachmanides does so in his perush, if you want to see over there his retaliation. But Rabbenu Avraham just vocalizes his disagreement with it and provides his own explanation, which we will see now. It could be that Yaakov and who Yaakov was eating Nizid Adashim, how do you explain that he was eating these Nizid Adashim? If they were wealthy, wouldn't he be eating something a little bit more satiating? Wouldn't he be eating something a little bit more high class? Why is he eating this poor man's food? And he says, it's possible that Yaakov and those like him, those who walked in the ways of Hashem, they would eat these kinds of foods. They would mima'et ba'achilat basar, not because they didn't have it, but rather because they wanted to distance themselves from physical pleasures. They were not materialistic people. They were not people who sought after these very enjoyable, tasty foods, but rather they were mistapek bamu'at. They were comfortable and enjoying with the little that they had, even though they had much plenty. They were happy with the small things and they did not chase after those indulgences. And that's the Perush of Rabbenu Avraham over here. Very fitting, as we mentioned last week, with this very pietistic approach in which there were many in Egypt at the time, and Rabbenu Avraham definitely went in the direction of definitely separating themselves from materialism, separating themselves sometimes even for society, for times, for hitbodedut, as we discussed last class, and definitely separating themselves from materialism in this very pietistic way that Rabbenu Avraham is describing. And he goes on to ask an additional question. He says, wait a second, if that's the case, if we are explaining the family of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and especially at that time being so wealthy, then why does Yitzchak need to send Esav on a whole mission to go provide for him food? Don't you have food? That was one of the points of proof for the Ibn Ezra. How does Rabbenu Avraham deal with that issue? Why are they going? Why is it such a big deal to go out and get food if they already have food? Why is Yitzchak asking for these matamim? Why didn't he go do it by himself if he has so much, right? And he says in the name of Rabbi Avraham HaHasid, we have some of his works. He was, again, a pietistic rabbi in the times in Egypt, that Yitzchak did what he did in order to create a connection with Esav, and in order for Esav to deserve the beracha in which he was about to get. In other words, Yitzchak was sending Esav on a mission to earn the beracha, and not only to earn the beracha, to create that connection between him and Esav. Because when you ask someone to do something for you, right, and they do it, that is a signal of love. By me doing a favor for you, I am demonstrating not only to you, but also to myself that I love you, that I care about you. It strengthens the connection between us, so much so that modern books on developing relationship and social intelligence suggest to ask someone that you're going to be doing business with for a small favor, something easy. Pass me the cup. Can you open that door for me? Just because when they do a favor for you, they themselves develop a love for you. So over here, it seems like Rabbenu Avraham is saying Yitzchak sent Esav on this mission to earn it, but also to develop that love between themselves. When Esav is going to do that favor for his father, he comes to love his father more as a result as well. And then he says, and it's a little bit strange. We've been describing how Yitzhak and Yaakov were so non-materialistic, didn't care about these kind of things. They're eating nezid adashim. So why all of a sudden does he need to eat these very hashuv mat'amim foods? I understand he's sending him on a mission. He could send them on any kind of a mission in order to earn it, in order to develop that relationship. Why specifically does Yitzhak need to eat these mat'amim? And he says, listen, we know in Masechet Shabbat, Chachamim tell us, "En hanevuah shora lo mitoch atzvut velo mitoch atzlut ela mitoch devar simcha." A Navi cannot be depressed. He can't be sad. He doesn't function 100%. He needs to be 100% on his game in order to receive nevuah. And if he's depressed, he's not on his game. And a Navi needed to be happy. He needed to be excited. He needed to be 100% invigorated and energized in order to receive this intense experience of nevuah. There are many pesukim which describe how the Nevi'im would carry with them none other than musical instruments. These musical instruments were tools in order to elevate the spirit, to make happy those Nevi'im so that they could be on the level of receiving nevuah. And this also relates to many midrashim which describe Yaakov Avinu for 20 years was not able to receive nevuah because he was so sad and depressed about his son Yosef seemingly having been killed, because a Navi cannot get nevuah in sad circumstances. However, if they're happy, they're more likely to be able to receive nevuah. And thus, says Rabbenu Avraham, Yitzhak wanted these mat'amim because at the end of the day, he was elderly and he was weak and he was not 100% at his physical peak. But these mat'amim would have elevated his strength. It would have made him happy. And that boost would have allowed him to give the proper nevuah. He continues on in his Sefer HaMespeak. Yitzhak wanted to give a proper beracha, not a regular beracha, like a greeting that you see a person and say, Hashem should bless you. No, not that kind of a beracha. Or like a tzaddik or a hasid gives berachot. From here we see that Rabbenu Avraham recognized such a practice. He wanted to give a beracha that was prophetic in nature. This is not a regular beracha. This is a beracha from a prophet, really the word of Hashem, ultimately. And in order to do so, he needed to receive nevuah, and to get that boost, to reach that level of nevuah at his old age, that mat'amim, that food, which would have made him happy, would have allowed him and facilitated him to get there. And this is a beautiful pirush of Rabbeinu Avraham, in which he demonstrates how the physical things that we have around us are really there to serve our spiritual needs. We do not do mitzvot in order to get physical beracha from Hashem, but rather we ask for physical beracha from Hashem so that we can be strong, taken care of, non-distracted, in order to be able to properly connect with Hashem. The spirituality is not for the sake of the physical, but rather the physical is to serve our spiritual needs. And this idea is reiterated once more towards the end of the parasha, when Yitzhak, actually towards the middle of the parasha, when Yitzhak is digging the wells and is on his way for business, and he's constantly getting into these fights with the shepherds of Gerar. And at one of the wells, Vayikra Shem habe'er Esek ki hit'aseku imo. Now, what does that mean, Esek? Why did they call the well Esek? They were fighting over this well, Yitzhak and the Pelishtim at the time. And Rabbeinu Avraham explains Esek as an Arabic word Shin Gimel Lamed, which basically means it was overly burdensome for him. Yuvam mizeh sod gadol, says Rabbeinu Avraham, ki avot alehem hashalom im kol oshram, as wealthy as they were, and that was his position, not like Ibn Ezra, but rather he says they were very wealthy, and this is important because you should know that they had so many possessions. Lo hayu asukim b'inyanehem hageshmiim. They did not care about these physical possessions. That was not their focus. It was not their. They were not preoccupied with it. V'iskam hamiti, but rather what were they really focused on? What was their main achievement? What was their main focus? It was only the spiritual matters. It was connecting with Borei Olam. And once Yitzchak started the process of developing that be'er, and there's a fight over it, and it was such a burden on him, and it was taking so much time and such a headache, he called it Ayesek to tell you, be'er zo, this well, natna lanu Ayesek v'ma she'en b'tiv'enu lahasik bo. It's causing too much work, and I don't want to work so hard, or I don't want to spend so much time on this. I'd rather spend my time on spiritual matters. This is taking too much of my time, and I don't care about these physical things. The physical, again, is just there to serve my spiritual needs. And when Hashem blesses us with these physical berachot, we should keep in mind that these berachot that we ask Borei Olam for should not come to distract us from our spiritual needs, but rather should be there so that we're comfortable, so that we have peace of mind, and so that we could energize ourselves and focus our energies in the service of Borei Olam. For more classes on Tanakh-related subjects, please visit TanakhStudy.com and stay tuned for next week as we continue the Perush of Rabbenu Avraham ben Harambam on Parashat Vayetze. Have a great week, everyone.